Hi, my name is Dina Yazdani. I'm 18 years old and a Global Citizen Corps leader with Mercy Corps. I was born and raised in the Portland, Oregon in the United States, and my parents are secular Muslims, Iranian and Malaysian. First question. How have the events of 9/11 impacted your everyday life, directly or indirectly? Well, I remember my junior year in high school, I was writing a paper on the Taliban, so of course I checked out a lot of books about the Taliban and Osama bin Laden from the library. Coincidentally, the FBI was trying to gain access to library records to see what books people were checking out. And if you ask Muslim and Arab Americans, they probably would have said that what I had done was really careless. We know that there's racial profiling that goes down in the US, and we have to be extra cautious of what we do. It's always on our mind. When I travel, I don't bring my Quran. I don't bring my books about Palestine. If we're ever pulled aside, all these things can be used against us, and I don't know anyone else in this country but our community that has to worry about these little things. In this sense, we have to limit our own freedom of speech and expression out of fear because we don't want to be labeled as terrorists. Second question. Your generation has sometimes been referred to as the 9/11 generation. What does that mean to you? Do you agree with that label? How do you think the events of 9/11 have impacted your generation? Well, our generation was raised in an atmosphere of fear, and I believe this is because of September 11th. The government acted hastily to invade Iraq, and a majority of the American people supported President Bush out of fear that another 9/11 attack would happen to us without realizing what the consequences would be. The country has become so engrossed with the Bush Doctrine, the idea that we have the right to preemptively strike if we feel threatened, without thinking of what the consequences could be later on. And it's us, the youth, who have to suffer from those consequences now. Our generation is nothing like what our parents or our grandparents was. The country has moved on from focusing on education instead to the military. We're in debt because of the actions this country took after 9/11, which has a huge impact on our lives. Gas is unaffordable, food prices higher than ever, public K-through education barely funded, with lowest graduation rates, and college is absolutely unaffordable. And because of these debts, Congress wants to slash funding for childcare, Medicaid, Social Security, etc., which is all going to affect our lives later on. It's going to be hard. And we have to deal with how the U.S. dealt with 9/11 more than any other generation. It's because we are the 9/11 generation. Third question. What do you remember most from the day September 11th and from the weeks and months that followed? Well, like many Americans, the first thing my family thought of when we heard about 9/11 is if our family friend was okay. He happened to be flying that morning, so that was our main focus, and it turned out he wasn't on that flight, so he was okay. I remember that morning my mom told me that the people who flew into the Twin Towers were Muslims, and I remember thinking, but we're Muslim. I was young, 4th grade, so I wouldn't begin to realize significance in that similarity until years later. A few weeks after 9/11, I remember playing with my neighbor outside, who was my age. We've been friends for years. I asked her to come inside, and she said that she needs to go ask her mom something. She never came back outside, and that was my last memory I had of playing with her. She comes from an all-American Christian family, very religious, and we just stopped hearing from them. And we weren't invited to any more parties, and definitely no more play dates. I think it was only a few years later, when I was a little older, did I start to realize that, this happened right after 9/11, and I'm pretty sure it happened because of fear. I think as I grew up, between the ages 4th grade, elementary school, middle school, and kind of inching my way into high school, I stopped identifying myself as Muslim because I didn't want people to think that I was one of them. And I was even one of those people who would say, no, Islam is evil. Why would you want to believe in that? But, as I grew up, I realized that this was wrong, and that I shouldn't be ashamed to call myself a Muslim. Fourth question. Many critics say the human cost of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan was borne by just a few. Should there be a national service requirement for all young Americans? I believe there's something perverse in forcing young people to serve their country, especially with the wars this country is involved with now. I believe that the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan are unethical, and that young Americans shouldn't be forced to participate in them. And realistically, it's not good if a country wants to win a war. Think of the soldier who released the pictures of the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. He did that because he didn't believe in the war he was fighting in, as did tens of thousands of other soldiers, American soldiers in Vietnam. That in turn sparked protests around the country that eventually pressured Nixon to end the war. Nonetheless, soldiers stopped fighting the war, stood up against the government, said, "We're not going to kill any more people." So the worst thing a country could do is to force people to fight a cause they don't believe in. Fifth question. How would you describe current relations between Muslim and non-Muslims in the United States? Current relations between Muslim and non-Muslims in the U.S., frankly, aren't good. You hear stories about how Muslims and non-Muslims used to coexist around the world. In the United States, mosque next to church. But this recent terrorism has uprooted that, and because of it, it has forced non-Muslims to separate themselves from Muslims because of fear. What happens because of this separation is that the non-Muslims' idea of what Islam is comes from what these poor, uneducated people on the other side of the world, holding RPGs and blowing themselves up in the name of their God. They don't understand that 99.9% of Muslims don't believe in what they're preaching, what their idea of jihad is, that this isn't our Islam. But this is their only image of Muslims, so they don't want Muslim communities or Muslims as their neighbors. They're afraid of terrorism. They embrace the idea that Islam is evil, as are their followers, because they don't know the true Islam, the peaceful one that we all believe in. That's why there's mosque and Quran burning going on around the country, why there's more violence toward Muslims and Arabs than there has ever been. In Muslim communities, Arab communities are scared and they feel unwelcome because of this hostility. And so many Muslims shut themselves from the rest of society too. There are a lot of people reaching out across communities to bring non-Muslims and Muslims together, but it's not enough.